what the underlying cause of that is a process of inflammation. So it's the inflammation that is now being looked at very closely as being precipitating cause for things like OCD, depression, autism, bipolar, schizophrenia. Just inflammation is the key, and that's why
the inflammation leads to hormonal deficiencies in the brain. And what we found is that there's, since 1986, Dr. Bipolar out of Paris found that we have enzyme systems that take cholesterol and convert it into hormones that actuate and regulate our brain function, from schizophrenia to ALS to Parkinson's disease to bipolar to all the different disorders. There was a recent article that I sent out to our journal group, and Andrew's in it, and it was about management of neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, to treat psychiatric diseases. And in the past 6 months, we've been starting to see a lot of articles talking specifically about inflammation creating all these things that we're trying to treat with medications that are ineffective. It's unfortunate that when science comes out, and it's really good science, that it takes another 20 to 30 years before it gets into the medical community.
And there's no obligation for a general practitioner to be up on this stuff.
No, absolutely not, because it's status quo.
And it's changing constantly.
Yes, and that's what has me in frustrated state all the time, is because the science that's been sitting on the bench, what I've been told I do, is called translational medicine, where I take the research that's on the bench that's already been done, and I look at it in large groups and then apply it into the clinical practice. And that's how we've had our success, is because we've taken the stuff that's sitting there ready to be used, that's not being used because we're in the paradigm of don't do anything for 30 years. I mean, every generation, a little bit, something better happens, but it takes 30 years.
So, Andrew, please go back to how you found out about Mark and what changes you made and what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I link up with Mark in Southern California. We run the labs, but we don't get the results back for like 2 or 3 weeks. But he gives me what he calls a provocative testosterone injection just to see how I react. And like up until this point, man, like my life has just been a complete disaster. I mean, I've put a gun in my mouth several times and actually had thought about like, if this is how life is going to continue and I continue to have this type of negative effect on my family, I think I'll just end it, man. You know what I mean? And I got to the point where I was just like, I can't do it for my family alone, and just kept driving. So found Mark. Mark found me, got the information, actually was there to see him in his office in Encino, get that injection. I'm driving south on the 405. I'm in bumper-to-bumper traffic like 2 hours later, and usually, man, like me and traffic just didn't mix. And to say that I had a hostile temper was like the understatement of the year. And I realized like, hey, all of a sudden I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm collected, I'm not having any issues. I'm like, whoa, I don't feel any anxiety. Like for the last year and a half, I like had this fist like coming out of my stomach, man, like at all times, 24/7. It was horrible. And it was gone. And I was like, if this is any taste of what could be, this is incredible. And I call my wife and we have a conversation for like an hour. And that's the first time that we had talked more than 2 minutes in like a year. And I didn't just say yes or no, because I just wasn't capable of anything else at that time. And so fast forward for a few weeks from there, you know, he gets the report back and he's like, hey, man, you're deficient in everything, you know, but we can fix this. And so we get on anti-inflammatory protocol and we replenish and replenish the hormones that are deficient or insufficient. And life slowly and surely started to turn back on, little by little by little by little, to where I'm at today. I'm off all medication. You know, I'm clean, I'm sober, performing as good, if not better than my pre-injury status. We started up an organization called the Warrior Angels Foundation to deliver this same level of healing to other people who are in the exact same predicament and situation. And now I'm excited to say, man, 3 years later, we've delivered it to over 200 people with incredible results. So it meets with the scientific criteria. We can predict, we can measure, and we can replicate. And now it's not just my story. It's not just Matt Gosney's story. Mark's done this like 1,400 times. We've done it 200 times through our organization, where somebody, like we did a a 3-year TBI study, a cohort. We took 58 of those 200 people, just the ones that had attempted suicide. 58 individuals attempted suicide. We showed that within 3 months, they 91% had a 50% improvement.
Correct.
So almost everybody had at least a 50%. This is in their subjective analysis improvement. After 1 year, 73% of that population was off all medication. This is unheard of. This is unheard of. And this is people that actually attempted to take their own life, I think a minimum of 2 times in our study. So we're producing results that have never been annotated before. You know what I mean? And it's through the scientific model that Mark's come up with his protocols. In one location and all the stuff that I'm saying here, please don't take my word for it. You guys can go out and fact check it.
And I can't tell you how many guys have come up to me after shows that have either been in contact with you or have been in contact with other doctors because of the information that you've given out, and we're so thankful. And they're like, you're changing people's future. You're literally giving them an option that they didn't know existed. Yeah. They thought their world was black, and then you open the door and like, oh, you can be okay.
Yeah, we didn't give him a self-help book. We didn't give him any spiritual teachings, anything else. Just fix what was deficient, and they were able to come back and make their own choices to get their life back on track.
That is that is such a giant factor in this whole equation that people need to understand. It's not just about motivational speeches. It's not about memes that you put on your Instagram page that make you feel better about life. It's literally about the chemical balance in your physical vehicle. And if it's off, you're going to be off. And if it's off because of diet, if it's off because of injury, whatever the factors are, you got to figure out what those factors are, and you got to correct them. You got to correct them before self-help, before all that bullshit. Correct your diet, correct your whatever is deficient in your hormone levels, whatever's deficient in your nutrient levels. It's so goddamn important.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to, focus only on the neurosteroids and the inflammation, as you just said. Physical fitness and nutrition. My daughter Allison is naturopathic, and she works with us with the Warrior Angel Foundation to help with getting the gut-brain in sync so that you don't have the glutens, you don't have all the junk we talked about, because the poor nutrition generates more inflammation that passes through the gut into the blood, into the brain. And there was a study that came out of it was on the BBC's last week, where they were talking about, we finally figured out that if you have peripheral inflammation like disease like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, that the inflammation goes into the brain and can cause depression. Well, it's been in the literature for 30 years. They finally are starting to understand that things that happen on the periphery can affect our brain's function. Everybody is so different. So what happens is, as you start losing these hormones, one of the hormones that I've repeated a number of times, and I'll repeat again, pregnenolone, has been found to control the anxiety effect in the body, in the brain. So morning anxiety or pregnenolone or social anxiety can be affected. And I have patients who have been in auto accidents who've never had anxiety attacks or panic attacks, and they wake up 6 months after the injury and they've got morning anxiety. Yeah. Their pregnenolone levels, instead of being average about 110, are down at 6 or 7. You correct them back to 110, their anxiety disappears.
And what is pregnenolone?
Pregnenolone is called the mother of all hormones. It comes from cholesterol. It's the first hormone or steroid hormone, official steroid hormone that comes off of cholesterol. So if we interrupt cholesterol in our body, we lose pregnenolone, which becomes the precursor to DHEA and testosterone on one side, and progesterone and cortisol on another side. So with low pregnenolone, it can lead to all the hormones that help to regulate our brain function and our life. Cortisol, testosterone changes how we perceive pain. Stabilizing the pregnenolone and all those hormones in the brain changes how we perceive life. When you're depressed, you perceive pain, very little pain, as big pain. When you're not depressed, okay, bump yourself, it gets better. Table is looking back at the 1,000+ people that we've put on a program. Unfortunately, we only have about 50 veterans on the program. The rest are civilians. What we're seeing is those that are addicted to opioids or narcotics or alcohol addiction are able to get off it rapidly. When Matthew was on here, Matthew was on 15 different drugs. Of that grouping, he was on 8 Oxycontin a day. And I spoke to him recently specifically about this. He was taking it for 18 months. He was on morphine, 40 tablets. It's either 40 or 60 milligrams per tablet. And then a fentanyl patch, which is a pain patch. And in 6 weeks, he was off of 14 of his 15 medications. They're finding that in anorexia nervosa, women who are, starving themselves, who have psychological issues to it, if they don't respond to treatment, giving them testosterone improves it. So what we're starting to see is these neurosteroids and neuroactive steroids have influence on an array of psychological or mood disorders. And one of them is in bipolar, in the case that we're just touching on. A gentleman who was diagnosed with bipolar by the military and was put onto lithium and also ADD at the same time. So, and then what happened was he was given a challenge test with a low dose of testosterone, and within 32 hours or so, his symptoms disappeared.
If you're on an antidepressant and you're still depressed, guess what? That's probably not the underlying condition. It's what science has shown us is a hormonal imbalance. We're able to interdict that and effectively treat it.
An analogy that I use is, brand new Corvettes are absolutely bitchin' cars. And it's like having a Corvette with 4 flat tires. Now all we're going to do is we're going to fill up one of the tires with air, and you're going to try and drive the car. You're not going to be able to drive the car. Let's fill up the front 2 tires and drive. Okay, let's go and fill up 3.5 tires and you're going to drive. It's not going to happen. The synergy is in all the hormones that we have in our body, all the chemistry work together to give us a level of benefit of function that one by itself cannot do. And if you look at the failure reports that are in traumatic brain injury since 1959, it's called a futility failure, where these big pharmaceutical companies took these great drugs and gave one product to an individual with traumatic brain injury, and they didn't get any benefit greater than 10%. That's called failure or futility failure. And it's because, and other people are writing the because our system is so complex. How do you expect one product to fix it? You can't. And how do you expect
everything's got to be balanced.
It's all got to be balanced.
There's such an issue in this country when it comes to mental health, that mental health doesn't get looked at like the health of a bone or the health of a muscle. If you have a torn muscle, you have to get an emergency operation to reattach it.
Correct.
But if your brain is fucked, it's like, come on, don't be a pussy.
Yeah.
Toughen up, or stop being so down on yourself.
We're the sum of our chemistry. I mean, that's the deal.
Yes.
And when that's affected, that's when you have these different things that manifest.
And that's why we're seeing so many of the vets coming back and committing suicide, because they've been instilled with exactly what you said. Don't be a pussy,
Right.
Man up and do it.
That's what, it was, and that's why it was easy for me to say, well, I can speak to my credibility that that's not the case. So let's find some damn answers,
Right.
because I'm falling off the crazy train.
Right.
I have a gentleman in Michigan lawyer who was in a car accident. And about 6 to 8 months after his car accident, he developed morning panic attacks. And when we did the testing, prolactin was very low and his testosterone was low, which indicated that he had excessive amount of dopamine. It wasn't medication related. It was just what happened from his injury. He was producing more dopamine. So we did things to help diminish his dopamine production, and his panic attacks disappeared. Pregnenolone was one of those products.